Good afternoon. My name is Brian Ayres and I'm speaking from Rizzoli Languages. I'm an actor, that is to say I was trained as an actor, but I have specialized in the use of drama as a tool for exploring, using and teaching English, including creating texts with the students, even with the teachers. Recently, I created 24 short films for Rizzoli, which will accompany the latest language book, It's Literature. These films introduce 8 classic literary English texts. They're divided into 3 parts. There's a summary, the plot, there's a kind of biography dealing with the author, and there are links. We're particularly searching for links not only of the past but also of the present to try and make these books alive today. They look at texts from a different point of view. These slides are a way of giving you some notes, which will be available tomorrow on the website, but also a way of trying to involve the students in exploring literature in a creative and personal way. These are some suggestions for involving the students to help them understand what drama is. Today I'm dealing with drama, using Shakespeare as an example. It is based on a program I have developed which explores Shakespeare in particular. But what is theatre? What is drama? Ask the students. Everybody has some idea of what drama is. Some answers could be actors, audience, public. Audience, actors, public, a kind of circle which must be united. Play or plays, lights, dance, movement, mime, scenery, any of these are valid, and many more. It is also film. Film has all the qualities of theatre, but it is not live. It is filmed or recorded, preserved, and then projected. Film, video, etc., are probably closer to the student's experience. If we include TV, certainly. If we imagine filming, we start seeing the world from another point of view. For example, I can have a close-up or a long shot. This changes the point of view, not only of the person watching, but also the text. These are some brief notes that I have made in relation to drama. So I'm looking at it from 3 points of view. I don't think it's a good idea to involve the students in all this, but it is a good idea to have an idea of what the students should understand. And we can look at it from an art form. It's an art form which explores music, movement, language, time, space, light. It also deals with situations. This also applies to literature. So basic questions are very useful. What, who, where, when, how, and why, which is a pretty difficult question to answer. But also I would add what happens next, so that we get a development of what we're looking at. Then I can also look at it from the point of view of action, actors, acts, the development, what happens next, language, dialogue, poetry, prose, space, location, scenery, stage, light, color, intensity, time, period, rhythm, development, and of course, objects, properties in terms of theatre. They help comprehension, they help the actor, but they may also be symbolic. Costume, period, character, sound, sound effects, voice, music. These are just some of what I might define drama as. The logical progression is to understand the basic elements, work on texts in group of 3, 4, or 5, and for each group to present their scene to the others. You can do this starting in the first year without any need for text. They know how to create a situation. Presenting scenes means the students will automatically use dramatic techniques. A general introduction could be to ask them to create scenes and present the scenes to the rest of the class. They should be simple and have a clear beginning, development, and end. I will suggest some scenes later directly connected to Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, but for now, more preparatory activities. The following activities are based on questions. It's best to treat them as a game. It's important to wait for an answer and accept the answers. Better to challenge the students to think than simply tell them what to think. They should activate the students. Questions which activate. Making a summary on the blackboard or limb could be a good idea and a basis to add to or comment on later. Shakespeare. Shakespeare suggests. What do the students know about Shakespeare? Something, almost inevitably. Some suggestions they would give me might be some of his plays, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, Hamlet, Macbeth, sometimes many, sometimes a few. Most people can remember the title of at least one play. Most of his plays have a person or people as a title. Shakespeare was fascinated by people. He is considered to be one of the greatest creators of memorable characters. Where is Shakespeare? This is a provocative question. Some possible answers, usually the immediate one, is he's dead in the tomb. But he's also in theatres, probably in the town or city you live in. He's performed all over the world. Look out for a poster. Films of his work and others, i.e. Shakespeare in Love, modern versions of his plays, adaptations of his stories. He is quoted continuously, often without knowing it, in newspapers, magazines, pubs, and bars. See if you can find examples. I'm using these questions in the way that you might propose them to the students. He's in schools and universities, books of his works, criticisms, analyses, on TV, internet. The list is endless. Another question. What's in a word? The word Shakespeare? How many words in the word Shakespeare? Some possible answers might be shake, this is pretty obvious, and spear. Well, he's still shaking, and his works are a cocktail of wonderful stories. Some of the most memorable characters ever created, fantastic language, poetry, and prose. Spear. This word reminds us of one of Shakespeare's major themes, power. Can the students think of other themes? Well, they're pretty universal. Love, death, time. The word ear. He not only has a wonderful ear for language, but also the music of language. Speak. Hamlet gives the actors, players, specific directions as to how to speak, and Shakespeare was an actor. Using spoken language to communicate has always been an art. 1. Find words within the word Shakespeare. You can go on forever, also by changing the orders of the letters. See if these words could describe some of Shakespeare's essential characteristics. This simple game is possible with many different words. English has 26 letters, but more than 1 million words. Now let's work on a text. See if you can understand anything. Listen. 2 households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured, piteous overthrows do, with their death, bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, the which naught but their children's end could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage, which, If you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss? Our toil shall strive to mend. Can you understand anything? If you wish, you can use this recording in order to let the students hear it. Ask them to listen again. See if they can remember any key words. They will not remember the whole speech. No English person the first time would even understand the whole speech, but something they may be able to get. Some words. Prologue. This is the prologue of Romeo and Juliet. It sets the scene, presents the essential action of the play, leads us into the performance, and at the end encourages us to participate. I've split it into color coding simply to mark the possible structure of the speech. The students usually remember some words or phrases after hearing the text spoken, and more words or phrases if they hear it twice. For example, 2 households, blood or bloody, Verranno, 2 lovers, death, life. Given some of these words, can the students guess what play it is? 9 times out of 10, it is enough to understand that it is Romeo and Juliet. Verranno, households, lovers, death, life, blood. A word they sometimes get wrong is which rather than which. They sound identical. Which is appropriate in terms of Shakespeare's use of magic. The witches in Macbeth, the world of the Tempest, A Midsummer Night's Dream, but not this play. However, it is relevant to Shakespeare. Why the prologue to Romeo and Juliet? It's a brilliant, essential summary of the play. It's a sonnet, so both poetic and rigorously structured. It challenges the audience to listen, pay attention. Shakespeare is continuously reminding us that we are in the theatre. Working on a text, let's try reading aloud. Reading aloud is a very good way of approaching a language. We could use the prologue or a sonnet. Here, I will use sonnet 18. How do we do this? Clear objectives, one thing at a time. 1. One student reads 1 line. Now ask the student to reread speaking to everybody, so that the objective is slightly different. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Zoom. To everybody. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It should be more open, more communicative. Try with several students and see what happens. Some will succeed, some will not. 2. Choose some words and ask the students to speak them aloud. Ask them to work for clarity of pronunciation, and then to try and give the word meaning when they speak. Words are not just words. For example, compare, thee. Thee is difficult because there's the TH. Summer, summer, more, lovely. Compare, the quality of compare. The, summer, warm, more, lovely. Eternal. Words communicate. How do you make them communicate? How does Shakespeare do it? Let's try something with rhythm, because Shakespeare is musical. We have this continuous idea of the Iambic Pentameter, which he's not consistent with, but let's try and clap it out. Did-dum, 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 did-dum. Clapping, everybody. Did-dum, 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 did-dum. Of course, it's easier if you just use the emphasis, the strong emphasis. Did-dum, 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 did-dum. one of Shakespeare's technical musical techniques. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? If I want, I can also interpret it differently, but essentially at the moment I'm just looking for rhythm. In fact, the nearest equivalent today would probably be rap. Regular, repetitive, fun. Ask them to read the lines for phrasing. This will help us to understand. Most students see a line as a line, a sentence as a sentence, but of course it consists of much more. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Two different phrases, two different concepts. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Thou art more lovely and more temperate is almost an in parenthesis. The phrasing will help the students when they approach the text, because instead of thinking of it as a continuous structure, they will think of it as containing a series of images, ideas. Now read the text in sequence, one line at a time, going all round the class. Again, it's possible to work in groups and present the poem to the class. One group presented it as a rap, another as a man writing a letter to his love, another with different voices, splitting the poem into sections with a chorus for the last two lines. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Then we can also add sounds. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. This is fun anyway. But it means they have to pay attention to the words, the rhythm, the structure. Now let's work with some texts. The main rule is to simplify. You can always do more and go deeper, but only if the students are ready. There's an enormous difference working with a liceo classico or a liceo instituto tecnico. The objectives have to change. You can't help it. 1. Clarify the story, summarize. Not just the story of a work, a novel, a play, but also the story of the poem, the story of what you're dealing with in this moment. Where are we going here? 2, use extracts which reinforce the essential plot or the aspect of the play you wish to explore, or the poem you wish to explore. Here are some examples. Hamlet is very complex, so an essential storyline is very helpful. In the video section of the book, we have in a nutshell. For Hamlet, it goes like this. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. It is the story of a young man with problems. His father, the king, is dead. Hamlet's uncle becomes king and marries his mother. Wow. The ghost of his father appears and tells him the present king murdered him and demands revenge. Oh my God. He kills his girlfriend's father, Polonius, by mistake, and she commits suicide. This man really has problems. He is spied upon, sent away, captured by pirates, but escapes to fight a duel with his girlfriend's brother, Laertes. He is poisoned during the duel. But before he dies, he kills Laertes, sees his mother die, and finally kills the king, his uncle. The stage is strewn with dead bodies. Finally, Fortinbras, the Norwegian prince, arrives, and the body of Hamlet is carried out. Probably to trumpets. Shakespeare used musicians. Good night, sweet prince. From Hamlet, the famous soliloquy is almost obligatory. But who is Hamlet? What's he like? How do you imagine him? Describe him. What does he wear? Is he tall, short, fat, thin? Will your production, your Hamlet, be modern or historical? Shakespeare's was probably done in modern dress, that is to say, Elizabethan dress. What situation would you imagine that could lead to the question, to be or not to be? These are all questions the students can answer. Let's look at the text. One speech, but with a structure which builds an argument. I've sort of color-coded it, but also to underline the fact that it could be done with almost two different characters. One, Hamlet, putting part of the argument, and the other part of the argument. To be or not to be another character. That is the question. Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or the other half of Hamlet, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To be or not to be. A simple phrase which opposes two powerful opposites. Opposites are dramatic. Shakespeare uses them all the time. They shock us, make us think. Can the students think of opposites and then create phrases using them? It could be an activity in pairs. This is a soliloquy, a person speaking alone, but discussing with himself. This soliloquy could be presented by two or more people, each presenting different sides of the argument, to be or not to be. How can this be presented in class? Try. Ask the students. Divide them in groups. Now let's work on some scenes. So we'll work on some scenes from Romeo and Juliet. Working in groups in class, the students need about 20 minutes to prepare a scene. These short scenes are from Romeo and Juliet, and the objective is to perform scenes to the class at the end of this 20-minute period. I would divide the students into groups of 3, 4, or 5. Each group chooses a scene, prepares, and shows the result. You can then comment on what has been done. Scene 1. I've taken 3 scenes which more or less summarize the overall story. The party scene. It's shortened because it's too difficult to do a whole scene usually, and it's much easier to work on in small groups on a shortened version. This is when the two protagonists meet for the first time. It's a party scene. Do the students believe in love at first sight? The party is held to introduce Juliet to Paris, her future husband, but it's here that she meets Romeo. Who is in the scene? Clearly Romeo and Juliet, but it is a party scene, so that there are others present. Where? At Capulet's house. Romeo Montague risks by being there and should be in disguise. A mask? How? The students may not be able to imagine an Elizabethan party scene, but a party, yes. Music, dancing, eating, drinking, talking. What do we need to create a party? One of the great strengths of Shakespeare is his ability to create essential, recognizable situations which are both timeless and continuously relevant. Sometimes students have presented the scene with music. The language is very poetic and specific. Remember the rules we apply to speaking single lines. Pay attention to punctuation, phrasing, and the quality of the words. There is a major difficulty in this particular scene, which is to understand the game that Romeo and Juliet are playing. It's not a modern game. Romeo endows Juliet as a holy shrine and himself as a pilgrim. Apart from this, it is a classic meeting between male and female. the man taking the initiative and the woman not being too easily won over. Both are playful and have an immediate rapport. The religious metaphor also reinforces the importance of the meeting as a religious experience. Comments. After the scenes have been performed, it may be noted that the scene was clear or unclear. The actors could or could not be heard. Any use of costume and properties. This will clearly be limited in class, but even the use of a scarf or jacket, perhaps a paper mask for Romeo, changing Juliet's hair could be options. Use of the body to communicate. In this scene, dancing is possible. Did they make an attempt to represent the characters? The way the text is spoken is important. Search for aspects of the presentation that worked and aspects that could be improved. It's not an attempt to train actors, more a chance to understand what should be done with a dramatic text and a chance for the students to actively present themselves and be creative. Some groups have found music on a cell phone, if this is permitted. Scene 2. This is the beginning of the balcony scene. It is only at the end that Romeo reveals himself. Again, he is in a dangerous situation. The balcony creates two levels. Juliet is high and Romeo is low. This underlines the obstacles they will have to overcome. Romeo idealizes and glorifies her. Juliet is longing for him and imagines that the impossible is possible. What words could the students use to express Romeo and Juliet's feelings? The scene will continue until they promise to marry, and then they are interrupted. Here, it helps to give great importance to phrasing. Let Shakespeare help sounds like, oh, the English oh, not the Italian oh. The English oh and I me. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. The east and the sun. What's in a name? Take all myself. Henceforth I never will be Romeo. Key phrases. The aside could be to himself or to the audience. What words would the students use to describe their love? Passionate, powerful, elemental, essential? What words will they use? The one great obstacle they have, their name, is superficial for them. Can the students manage to suggest night, secrecy, passion? The scene could be modernized. Two young people today. One group did it with cell phones and at the end sent selfies of themselves. It could be made fun of, a comic version. Only two actors, but it could be spoken by several people. Students who do not act could just speak. It could be introduced by a narrator, just as Shakespeare introduces the play with a prologue. The students should try and find their way of presenting it. The video dealing with the author biography outlines the main features of the Globe Theatre. Scene 3 is shortened, almost at the end of the play. Mercutio is dead, Tybalt is dead, Paris is dead, Juliet stretched out on her tomb, apparently dead. Romeo has arrived with some poison. Here, Shakespeare gives clear clues to the action. This is something he often does. The stage directions are in the speech. Eyes look, presumably she looks. Arms embrace, presumably he embraces. Seal with a kiss. Here's to my love. Where is my lord? Presumably, as she looks. What's here? Presumably, she sees something. I will kiss thy lips. This is thy sheath. The action and positioning of the actors are fundamental if the scene is to work. Maybe Juliet could lie on the table. But where is Romeo, and where are they in relation to the audience? The properties here are fundamental, the dagger and container for the poison, but they could be mimed. The simpler, the better. It needs time. Time for Juliet to wake, understand where she is. The punctuation, phrasing, and pauses. My lips are warm. Pause. Oh, happy dagger, gives the actress time to move from the kiss to the desperation of seeking death. Shakespeare is very accurate about these things. He was an actor. The death of two young people, star-crossed, is enough to create a very moving scene. These, in my opinion, are the essential things to think of. One, understanding that Shakespeare should be performed. You can read him, you can read about him, but he wrote in order to be performed. Shakespeare is here and now. Key words would be dramatic, full of life, and it's essential to think of Shakespeare as being fun. After all, he made a lot of money out of entertaining people, and this for him was very important. Any questions? I'm now waiting for questions.
Buongiorno a tutti, questo è il momento per fare delle domande. Vi ricordo che verranno dati gli attestati di partecipazione e domani nel sito troverete la presentazione e gli altri materiali. Se volete fare delle domande, questo è il momento, grazie. Sometimes the language is too difficult for students. How can we help them? Da Alga Geminiani.
Okay. I think reading aloud is the first pass towards helping the students understand the language. And the second task is to make them work on it. If you ask them to actually do something with the language, they will have to understand in order to try and do something with it. So if I ask the students, for example, to do a very simple scene, the beginning of Macbeth, the witches, for example, which is very simple, they will immediately start coming and asking me for keywords. They will ask me what the situation is about. So an overall picture of what Shakespeare is talking about is important. This is equally difficult for English people because Shakespeare is not something which is immediately accessible. However, from a certain point of view, he has key things which are wonderfully accessible to everybody. Fantastic stories, incredible characters, and a beautiful use of language. So I think basically it depends on what students you're working with, but one, focus on very small pockets of language, one line at a time, one block of a speech, very short scenes. And if you focus on first understanding an outline of what actually you're dealing with is very useful for the students, but also ask them to do something with it. This is something that the students lack more and more. They lack the chance to actually participate, to do. And this is something which, in my experience, they enjoy. I hope that answers your question. Please come back to me if it doesn't. I'm looking for the next question.
How can we leverage Shakespeare to explain Brexit to students, or the other way around?
Liberate Shakespeare? Sorry?
Leverage Shakespeare.
Well, Shakespeare is nothing to do with Brexit. At the same time, he is, because he's very English. He considered himself English. He is English. But Shakespeare actually, all the world's a stage. All the world's a stage. He performed in the Globe Theatre. So his concept was that he is, from a certain point of view, often it's difficult for scientific students, for example, to approach literary texts because they don't think it's anything to do with them. Well, actually, Shakespeare is scientifically exploring the means of communication, and his concept is global. It's not, I am English. There's no doubt about it. In fact, he actually uses very often, if you look at the number of plays that are Italian, The Merchant of Venice, Romeo and Juliet. I mean, he just doesn't have this concept of Brexit, which is let's close the door and keep everybody out. So in my opinion, and you will find that actually they will find, if they look, they will find Shakespeare pretty much everywhere. I'm not talking about England, I'm talking about Italy now. Where they are, they can find Shakespeare, not only in the school, but also in the town they live in the bars. I went into a bar the other day, and there's a Shakespeare sonnet written on the wall. Excuse me, an Italian bar. There's a Shakespeare sonnet, which is not an easy thing to get your head around, on the wall of the bar. So they will find this directly. All the world's a stage. There are so many, to be or not to be, much ado about nothing. That's used in the papers continuously. Anyway, so in my opinion, one way of using Shakespeare against Brexit, because personally I'm against Brexit, but anyway, is to explain that he is actually a universal character. He's one of those people that go beyond time and space.
The question is, which strategy could they use in a one-to-one lesson?
In a one-to-one lesson, you can use exactly the same strategy as here. In this case, I would ask the student to actually read a text, for example. You can also ask the student to imagine performing a text, for example. How would you perform this? What kind of character is, for example, Romeo or Hamlet? If you like, you could use the technique which actually students quite like, which is more towards their world, of imagining filming. For example, what's the first shot in the balcony scene? Is it Romeo jumping over the wall? Or is it from behind Romeo, behind a tree, looking up at the balcony? I mean, so here we are, we're beginning to imagine, because actually film actually has to create the images which Shakespeare uses through words, which he creates through words. So in this case, I think filming is also a good way of doing it. But if you ask the students simply to actually work on it practically, if necessary, simply imagining. But certainly you can ask the student, for example, read a line. You see, very often we have the idea, if it's not read correctly, there's no point. But actually, you're not going to read everything beautifully the first time. Neither does an actor. Two households both alike in dignity. No, two households. This is an image. Both alike in dignity. This is almost a parenthesis, and it's an image of the kind of households they are. It's a little bit more information. I'm not going to be able to do that the first time. I'm just simply going to read two households both alike in dignity. And I'm not going to understand either of those two concepts, probably. So in this case, have fun, explore the language. Language is magic. We don't know what language means, because every person that is using those words uses them in a different way. If you want, you can have fun with words. Look at a chair. What does a chair suggest to you? What's a door? Ah, wow, a door is, well, for the student, a door is a door. Una porta in Italian. But actually, in Japanese, it's completely different. So in this case, these are just words which are provocative. They open another world just as the door opens, and what's on the other side could be anything. So I would be playful with a one-to-one student, but I would actually get them to work on text, and even difficult text, because if I hear this text, for example, the prologue to Romeo and Juliet, I'm not going to understand very much the first time, but the second time I'll understand 2 or 3 words. The third time I'll understand 4 or 5 words. The fourth time I might get a phrase here and there. This is what learning a language is about. It's not about pretending that got it, because you don't understand. We don't understand. Nobody understands everything. It's a game, an exploration, an attempt to try.
Do you think it is necessary to prepare students for a preliminary study on dramatic theatrical aspects in order to better interpret the characters?
Well, it depends on what your aim is. I don't think it's... If you're going to interpret their characters, you need to have a clear idea of what kind of character it is. So essentially, what you're focusing on here is questions about the characters. For example, Romeo. If I'm an actor, it's no good my saying Romeo is a passionate, attractive boy. It doesn't do anything to me. I can't be passionate and I can't be attractive like that. So I have to ask specific questions. What am I wearing? How do I move? How do I move from the garden to the balcony? How do I step out into the light? Do I jump out into the light in an excited way? Or so I think being specific is the most useful thing. I don't think you have to do a general preparatory introduction to drama. You can do if you want. It's useful to have an idea of what drama is, but if you want to explore character, explore character. Ask questions about the character. Specific questions, not general questions. What's he wearing? How does he move? How does he speak? Does he speak quickly? Does he speak slowly? These kind of questions are much more useful than having a general preparatory idea, a general preparatory session on drama itself, because this is only, the danger is it's only rational, it's only theoretical. And actually, what acting is something that Shakespeare was perfect at, which is giving us concrete, simple language, situations, and characters to deal with. They happen to be incredibly profound and incredibly rich, but we can easily start with what they are. 2 young people in love. How do they approach each other today? How do they do it in Romeo and Juliet? This is already thinking about how 2 people approach this moment of great importance to them. Specific, simple questions. I don't think you need a theoretical or general introduction. That's my opinion. Okay, we're going to close. Thank you very much for tuning in. Goodbye.